Hello, aspirants. Welcome to PW OnlyIAS. I'm Harpreet Singh with the daily analysis of the Hindu from 21st of October 2024. Let's begin today's analysis. This is a QR code where you can basically find the board work which has been done over here, along with all the other information and dimensions that you need for your preparation. What are the topics that we have taken for today's analysis? First of all, Lady Justice Significance, an article that came in the Hindu today. Then India AI Mission, the multi-dimensional poverty index, the editorial that came in the Hindu on bipolarity. Then we have the news in shorts for your prelims examination and the MCQs. Now, please remember that on the demand of many students who said, sir, we need the explanations also of all the questions that are being given. So from today onwards, we're going to have the answers explanation also in this particular PDF itself. I request you, after you have seen this particular lecture, please download the PDF from the Telegram account that I've mentioned over here. And you can basically see what are the reasons why particular answer has been given and what is the background information related to each MCQ that has been given. This is for your assistance and for obviously gaining knowledge with respect through the MCQs. Let's begin today's analysis. So this article that came has been in the news for quite a few days, but when it came in the newspaper, it pointed out very important dimension with respect to the change in the statue of the Lady Justice. Now let us see first of all brief idea what it is and what is the inner sense that we need to see from this change. Now see, this was the old statue that had been basically continuing since the British time. Now this is the new statue of the Lady Justice that we have. Now you would be observing that certain changes have been made, but remember, let us go a little to the background of understanding this. You would be asking, how could even this particular statue originate? What it means today is something very different from what it meant when it was actually originated. Now let's see. Please remember, in the modern day, the Lady Justice that we call is Justia, that is the goddess of justice in the Roman mythology. So it dates back to the concept of Roman mythology. But remember one thing, that it depicts like the lady over here is blindfolded. It has a sword and these are the scale, right? These are the scales. Now this in today's terms, we interpret it very different way. But what it basically meant in the 14th century, it was a satire. What it meant was it basically depicted a corrupt legal system with a blind eye. So in the 14th century, it did not mean what we understand today. In the 14th century, it means that the legal system of that time was blind, it was corrupt, not listening to the people. That is why this particular image was basically depicted during that time. Now what happened, please see. In the 19th century, this particular statue was reinterpreted. Reinterpretation took place. Now, based on that reinterpretation, please understand, what was the reinterpretation? Blindfold represented impartiality. That means in front of the law, the law is not going to differentiate between the different people. Or someone is rich, someone was poor, or someone belongs to one set of community, or some other belongs to some other community. So there's going to be impartiality. Next is scale. Scale represent balance. That means the truth, and that means the law. What is there? Law shall prevail. Sword represents the authority and power. It is basically in the hand of the law. It has the authority to, let us say, punish someone, or let us say, set someone free. So this was a reinterpretation that came out from this particular interpretation that was there earlier. So this is something that one should know. Now remember what happened. This is the new lady statue that we have. What does it basically show or represent? Now please understand, the new statue represents moving away from the colonial mentality, because that statue was basically became a part of the Indian judicial system to the colonial system. So we wanted to change that system. So what is going on? Over here, you'll be representing the attire that is worn by this lady is basically sari. So this is basically represents the Indian culture. Second, you will see the blindfold does not exist here. What does that mean? Law is not blind. It sees everyone equally and everyone has a right to justice. Now, this is what is a newer way of interpreting things. Like, it is not blind. Now, this is our representation with respect to what view we have with respect to law. So that law is not blind. Do you realize when we study polity, there's a concept of procedure established by law, right? And there's a concept of due process of law. Now, in the due process of law, the judiciary even goes away from what is the procedure that is established by law in order to give justice. Along with it, we have the concept of complete justice in the Constitution of India. So we definitely can see that law is not blind. The judicial system has its own aspect of even going beyond the law and giving a judgment. So that is why this represents the practicality of today's time. Next is constitution instead of the sword. Did you realize that in the previous statue, there's a sword here? Now the sword has been replaced by the constitution. This is a constitution in the left hand of the lady. What does it mean? It represents the supremacy of the constitution. Another thing that remains is the scales. Scale is same thing. That means, what does it mean? Impartial justice delivery. This is the representation. So the concept of the scales remain, other things have been changed. The question that this article raises, please, is firstly, was our understanding or conveying you the understanding of what the change represents from something from an overall aspect. But do you realize that mere change of this lady has changed the system? No, that is what is the important thing that the article basically points out. They said it is good. You're representing what the Indian culture represents. It is good. You are focusing on the contemporary dimension. It is good. You're focusing on the Indian cultural aspect. But if the issues that are prevailing in the judicial system are not redressed, or the redressal is not there, then these changes will only be seen as cosmetic changes. See, the article mentions that the true significance will only be seen if the various issues are resolved. What are these various issues? Please see. Pendency of the cases. See, some of the topics that we've already discussed in the previous analysis of the editorials and the news. But see, these are the important things that have been mentioned in the article itself. Greater than 5 crore cases are pending in all the levels of judiciary. At the higher judiciary, that means the Supreme Court, High Court, as well as the lower judiciary. So 5 crore cases pending. Along with it, there was recently an PIL filed in the Supreme Court, which basically stated that there should be a deadline of 3 years in which all these cases that are pending, let us say the 5 crore cases that are pending, should be resolved. And the Supreme Court basically said that this is not a valid PIL, so it was dismissed. So that means Supreme Court itself admitted the fact that it is not practically easy to solve those 5 crore cases within the duration of 3 years. So we realize that at a practical level, these cases are going to rise with time. And we very well know that justice delayed is justice denied. Second, memorandum of procedure. We realize that we saw that National Judicial Accountability Act, Commission Act, that basically came into force, was basically declared as against the constitutional aspect under Article 13. So it was declared ultra vires. Now, based on that, then the discussion between the government of India and the Supreme Court was going on, how the judges should be appointed. Based on that, a memorandum of procedure was being discussed. Now, there is no consensus on that memorandum of procedure, and that has been pending for the past 8 years. Now, there's again a conflict between the government and the court on that basis. We realize that, so there is no consensus. So again, the same collegium system that we had discussed is still continuing. And very often when the courts basically submit the list of the judges that can be appointed to the Supreme Court or the High Court, then the names, let us say, are put in a pending list and then they're not appointed. So what happens then? The conflict between the government and the court also already basically escalates and rises. So this again, this conflict issue that is not being resolved. Next, representation of the SC, ST, OBC and the minorities. We realize that less than 25% are in the higher judiciary from these particular communities. This is again represents that these communities are not present there. And though if we see from the population terms, These occupy overall a large number of the population of India. Next is representation of the women. Less than 15% women are present in the higher judiciary. We have the women close to 50% of the population. We have less than 15% in the higher judiciary. So these are certain concerns that are there. Vacancies, high courts are working at 60 to 70% of their strength. So do you realize that? What is the significance? When we realize that the statute is being changed, it should also come with the means and vigor to resolve these issues equally. If these issues are not resolved in the coming time, then merely change of the statute will be a manifestation or representation of certain cosmetic changes that have taken place. This is what this particular article is trying to point out, and that becomes important from our analytical point of view with respect to GS paper 2 also. Let's move ahead. Now, this was in the news again, came in the newspaper also. India AI. Now, why it is in the news, please understand. Recently, India AI mission has selected 8 projects to promote responsible AI development. The projects are chosen under the mission Safe and Trusted AI pillar. So now, if certain projects are being launched under this, we need to know what mission AI basically, India AI mission basically is. Let us see what it basically stands up for. About India AI mission, it is a government-backed initiative to promote ethical and responsible development of AI in India. Why this particular mission basically came? What is the concern or what is the reason for its basically enunciation in India? Please understand. We realize that AI is the future. You realize if you see the Instagram, Google, Meta, all of them are using AI in one or the other way. Now we know that Chat GPT, you write any question, you get an answer. But these are certain things which are used, let us say, for knowledge purpose, for commercialization. But also we realize that we have the concepts of deepfake technologies in which photographs of women are being morphed and being used as a means of, let us say, spoiling their image. Let us say videos which actually cannot be differentiated from whether they are original or not because the AI with time is advancing. So we realize that when AI is a tool which can be used as a beneficial tool for, let us say, knowledge, let us say, learning, along with it, we realize that there are a lot of issues that are concerned with that. So India AI mission basically deals with the aspect that to promote the ethical as well as the responsible development and usage of AI in India. That is very, very important in today's time. See, nodal ministry, the Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. Along with it, please understand, focus on responsible AI. This mission aims at, what are the aims? Create a framework for safe and transitionary AI, trustworthy along with it. See, two things have to be understand. Safe and trustworthy along comes with the concept of, please understand, as we are transitioning from traditional to advanced tech, which is basically towards the AI, this transitional nature, if it is not trustworthy and safe, will lead to a lot of issues. So, the framework that needs to be created should be safe, it should be trustworthy, which basically supports this transition from the traditional technologies that are being used towards the autonomous technologies, which are basically AI. Why I said autonomous and towards? Because AI technology is like a human mind. We realize that it basically uses the concept of intelligence that depicts what the human mind is, because it works on the concept of neural networks also that we saw with respect to the Nobel Prize winning also. So this has to be safe and trustworthy because this transition otherwise would create a havoc. This is what even the Honorable Prime Minister in one of his recent speeches quoted while talking about India AI mission. Next is democratize the benefits of AI. Now what happens? It should not be something that certain groups are benefiting while the others are not. So we need to democratize that. It should be for everybody to use, irrespective of the caste, class, gender, or any other dimension. Strengthen India's global leadership in AI. Now again, we realize that very often we are told that we do not have companies like Meta, Google in India. What India is vigorously pushing is all the companies in India and the startups that are there, they said work on AI because it is the future that is there. If we build certain companies based on AI, then again, why not we can have such big companies that will compete with giants like Meta or for that matter, Google. So strengthening India's global leadership can only be there if Indian companies try to focus on the research and development in the field of AI, along with the startups can play a very important role in this. For example, recently, various edtech companies, even at PW, will be realizing your answer evaluation based on AI has been there. Now, again, those are initial steps that have been taken towards the evaluation of your written copies also. With time, we'll see the technology even advancing further. That will help you even to get much more accurate, much more, let us say, better evaluation that learns with time. So that is a way forward which we see is strengthening. So that like PW is playing an important role towards usage of AI, many other companies are also using that can be basically worked on. Foster technological self-reliance. Yes, we should not be dependent on the foreign softwares merely. It should be our indigenous build-up also. Next, promote ethical and responsible use of AI. This is what is primarily the goal of this India mission. Please remember, when we talk about India AI mission, over here we had seen a lot of concerns with respect to faking of the videos, morphing of the videos, that you cannot basically differentiate between the original and what is not original. So being ethical usage along with it responsible use becomes very important. That is what is the one of the focal aims of this mission, India AI mission. Let's move ahead. This is implemented by, please remember, Independent Business Division under the Digital India Corporation. Now, key focus areas for the selected projects that we had discussed is machine learning, synthetic data generation, AI-based mitigation, ethical AI framework, privacy enhancing tools, explainable AI, AI governance testing, algorithm auditing tools. So these are certain dimensions which we see with respect to the key focal areas with respect to the projects that have been selected. Now, next topic that comes over here is the Multidimensional Poverty Index 2024. Now, this is again very important because whenever we talk about poverty, the thing that comes into our mind is what income a particular person is earning, and because of that income parameter, someone is poor. But it is important that according to the Multidimensional Poverty Index, one should remember that poverty is more than a lack of money. People in poverty experience multiple deprivations which overlap. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index measures health, education, and living standard and gives a comprehensive, holistic index of what poverty basically is. Now, please understand. The Global Multidimensional Poverty Index 2024, over here we see multidimensional poverty refers to the poverty that goes beyond income levels. That is not confined merely to income level. It is an important and core ingredient, no doubt in that. But it is not the only parameter. It includes various deprivations that people face in their daily lives and affecting their well-being. So it is a more holistic parameter in order to see what basically poverty is. Let's move ahead and please understand. Multidimensional poverty is measured across different non-income based dimensions. Now, this can be asked in your examinations also. This is a chart that I've put. There are primarily the major three dimensions are here, along with the weight that is assigned to them. First is health, second is education, and third is living standards. Health is given 1/3 weightage, education again 1/3 weighted, and then living standard again 1/3 weightage. Under each category also we realize that sub categories are there. Please remember, in your preliminary examination, this can very well be asked that what among the following parameters are there with respect to the multidimensional poverty index, or let us say what weight is assigned to them, or let us say they can say, let us assume school attendance in, let us say one of the statements is assigned more weight than the cooking fuel. This can be asked in a way. So you should be aware of these standards or the parameters and a little bit about the weight also. See, we see 1/3 weight to all these three things. Under health, we have half of the weightage to child mortality and then nutrition. Then years of schooling, 1/6 weightage, and school attendance, another weightage. Now we realize that 1 by 18, that is cooking fuel, sanitation, drinking water, housing, electricity, and assets. Now, these are also the indicators that are there. Now, you should be aware of these. It becomes important because now you realize that child mortality, nutrition, schooling, attendance, cooking fuel, sanitation, water, housing, electricity, assets, all these things are given weightage when they're calculating your poverty. So this gives a more holistic picture of the condition of the people. So another thing that you should be aware of, it is published by Oxford Poverty and Human Development Initiative and Human Development Report Office of the UNDP. This is the bodies which are basically publishing the multidimensional poverty index. Now let's begin. Let's move ahead. What are the highlights of this particular report? Now see, they're saying that the acute poverty across the world, it said that 1.1, greater than 1.1 billion people are acute, facing under the condition of acute poverty in India, in across the world. So do you realize that out of close to 7.5, 8 billions, greater than 1.1 billion people are in acute poverty condition? Countries with highest poverty in India, 234 million people. Pakistan 93, Ethiopia 86, Nigeria 74 million, Democratic Republic of Congo 66. These 5 countries account for 48.1% of the global poor. Can you imagine in India, in spite of so many programs we have, initiatives we have, still we realize that with respect to the multidimensional poverty index, which is more of a comprehensive figure, we realize so many people are still suffering from poverty. Let's move ahead. Child poverty. Under 18, we see that 584 million, greater than 584 million people are in extreme poverty globally. Adults, 13.5% adults are in the category of extreme poverty. Regional distribution, we realize sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, we realize 83.2% are facing the issue of poverty. In low income, 34.8%. With respect to the conflict zone, please remember, nearly 40% of the global poor live in the conflict affected regions. So whenever you are talking about regions, let us say with respect to international relations or conflicts going on, we can say that according to the multidimensional poverty index report, we realize 40% of the global poor live in the regions which are prone to conflict. Because obviously when there's conflict, your livelihood is destroyed, your houses might be destroyed. We are seeing right now in the conflict in the Middle East, the people are moving towards poverty in those regions because of the conflicts among the various countries that are going on. So this is also being pointed out by the multidimensional poverty index report. Next comes the editorial. Now this is quite an interesting editorial. Please remember, one thing that I need to tell you in prior before we discuss this. Now this is one of the views that is represented by Shashi Tharoor. Now Shashi Tharoor, or for that matter any other thinker who basically writes on the articles, it is their view. It doesn't mean that they're completely right or doesn't mean they're completely wrong. As a person who is reading, you should read what their views are and certain facts, certain different dimensions that are given that you can pick it up from there. Please remember, the writer's thinking should not that their thinking become your thinking. No. That is what is the need of the editorial, that when you read something, you should have a common sense to interpret that what is right, what is wrong. They might not be perfectly right or not perfectly wrong. So that is, keeping that in mind, we are reading this again, the editorial. Please remember that. Okay. So India's choices in a world becoming bipolar again. Please understand, there is something that before we begin with the concept of what is written here, I'll go a little bit back and understand, give you certain basics. Bipolarity. What does word bipolarity means? That means bi means two, polarity means poles. When we are talking with respect to international relations, we saw prior to the downfall of USSR and after, let us say, the world wars ended, we realized there were two major powers that were existing in the world. One was the United States, because United Kingdom or the Great Britain during that time, because of the world wars, they almost in a very poor economic condition. So they were not as supreme as their colonial past had been. During that time, it was the US which had risen. Along with it was a rise of USSR, right? The Soviet Republic. Now, these two powers were the major players in the international affairs. These two powers, because in the whole world, two major powers are there. So we saw two powers basically dominating the world. That means two poles existing. That is why we say bipolarity was existing that time. Because two major powers are there. Now they was not simply important powers, they were also ideological differences between them from every aspect, which basically led to the concept of Cold War developing between them. Because please remember, Russia was a country which had its ideology based on socialism, and America was a country whose ideology was based on the concept of capitalism. Now, Russia wanted to expand its gamut because the world wars had ended and they wanted to have more allies. Same United States was doing. So across the world, you realize whether it was a Korean conflict, whether it was a Indo-Pakistan conflict, whether it was a conflict in the Middle Eastern region, whether it was the Afghanistan conflict for that matter. These two countries basically made the whole world their playfield. Playfield, that means whichever country Russia used to, let us say, enhance its tentacles, United States would basically aid the enemy of that particular country and try to disturb the situation there. So both of the countries basically played an important role. During the early 1990s, when we realized that there was a downfall of USSR due to multiple reasons, we realized then after the downfall of USSR, a part of it, what we see, Russia remained. Other basically countries parted ways and formed their independent countries. That led to the creation of unipolarity. That means one major power in the world, that is the United States of America. Now, please understand. Going ahead, I'm telling you a brief about what the this editorial is also saying. As we move ahead, we realize that United States was the major power in the world, and its authority was something that every country thought it is a supreme power, and they used to even follow what the United States used to say. Till the 2008 economic crisis that basically happened. That was a time which we saw the United States economy crumbling. It was that time when we see China was slowly rising because its economy, from its traditional belief of socialism and communism, it was also allowing the various investment from the other countries, particularly the United States, to rise. So we realized during the 2007-8 crisis, though United States was suffering badly, China was rising. Economically, its manufacturing sector was zooming and booming to a great extent. Then we saw China's rise during that time. And what happened? Now for United States, what had been Russia during that time, China came as a new power. Now we realize that what the editorial basically talks about is regarding that dimension, but the editorial also says that the United States USSR conflict is not same as the United States China's conflict. We'll see those reasons also and study in depth what this article basically tells. I have given you the background of what had happened and to understand what the concept of bipolarity is. Now the editor, the writer over here says, is it a bipolar like situation? Though the article says India's choices in the world becoming bipolar again, but it is something very satiric also over here, that it doesn't mean necessarily it is becoming. So let us see what the article basically over here says. When we read the initial paragraph, we realize that it's right, the National Security Advisor meeting with the Chinese Foreign Minister in Russia last month. On one hand, basically, the National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, had went for a BRICS meeting over there, where the NSA met the Chinese Foreign Minister in St. Petersburg in Russia. And over there, discussions with respect to various dimensions had been taking place. Along with it, we realized that we see that USA is well aware that the USA is well aware of the rise of China, and it is doing its various means in order to counter the Chinese aggression. This is basically written in the introductory passage. As we move ahead, we realize that the writer, that is Shashi Tharoor, says that USSA and USS versus USSR conflict is not same as USA versus China. Please understand why. We realize that the United States and USA versus USSR issue during the 1960s, 70s, and 80s was something the whole world was impacted. But this same rise of China, that is USA versus China, we cannot compare these completely. There's a reason behind it. So there are certain differences between them. This can even be asked as a question in your mains examination. we see that USA is the largest investor in China. This was not the case in USA versus USSR, because USSR during that time did not have any investment as per se from United States, for that matter, any country, because it believed in the concept of socialism. So right now, if you see, USA is the largest investor in China, so it has a lot of stake in China. Disruption in the Chinese economy is going to impact USA's economy itself. Along with it, we realize that China owns more US treasury bonds than any other country. So China has its tentacles in the economy of United States. That means, in a way, USA is dependent on China also in various aspects. So in a way of threatening China for its rise is one mechanism, but USA very well knows that it has a very close interaction or connect with China. This is something that was not present in case of USA versus USSR conflict. Today, if China wants to harm, today if United States for that matter wants to harm China, it is itself going to suffer. If China wants to harm United States, it will also suffer, because the investment at a great extent comes from the companies from United States. So both are basically intertwined in a complex relationship that is there, which was not in case of USA versus USSR. Please understand. Oh, in this paragraph, it's talking about the end of USSR versus US. Bipolarity coincided with the advent of globalization. We see the early 1990s is an advent of globalization, also particularly in India and other countries also we saw. So because the conflict ended and we realized that various countries had been suffering from various dimensions, they were start slowly opening up the economies, as we saw in India also. So we saw advent of globalization in India and other countries starting, coinciding with the fall of USSR. Next, we see USA remained a leader till 2008 crisis that took place. We realized from the time of the fall of USSR till 2008, United States was an unparalleled, unchallenged leader in the global world. But 2008 crisis basically dented its economy very badly. We saw that with it was the rise of China. Now, during that time, we realized after that few years, China became a leading manufacturer in the world. And remember that when it started becoming a leading manufacturer and exporter, started with this basically led to China being treated as a threat to the United States. And what did United States do? It started its containment policy. What does a containment policy mean? That means you need to cut the wings of China and contain it within its aspects that does not hurt the interest of United States. So started the containment policy. That means United States would be dealing with or aligning with various countries in order to harm, let us say indirectly or directly, or threaten, or let us say as a means of deterrence, to basically show who the global power is. That is what, again, these conflicts started rising between China and India, China and United States. Then we realized that in this particular aspect, again, Shashi Tharoor writes that USA and China's are intertwined economies. What does intertwine? That means they're completely interlinked, locked with each other, as we had seen right now. That tentacles of China are there in the US economy and US investors are there in the Chinese economy. So both are dependent on each other. Though they might be at the geopolitical level fighting with each other in various ways, they know that they're dependent on each other. So this is something that is very important. As we move ahead, we realize that in this particular paragraph, it says that China has near parity in various aspects. Please remember, today we know that China is a very important player. But in various dimensions, let us say if we see certain dimensions with respect to military warfare, we see with respect to nuclear warheads. No, not matching US, but again, large number of nuclear warheads according to various reports. Number of battleships, it has even surpassed United States in that. So we realize that in various dimensions, it is basically surpassing even the United States. So that is again seen as a threat by the United States. That rise of China is basically going to contradict or go against the policy of some other country, being a challenge to its power that it had, the United States had in the global world. That is why what the threat is, that United States doesn't want that to happen. It wants to maintain its position in the world. So we realize that over here, this thing has been mentioned. Again, one more thing that we have missed over here is this particular section talks about very important thing. We see when we're talking about China-United States conflict, it is not merely a conflict of capitalism versus socialism or communism. Please understand. Why? Because this concept of capitalism versus communism or socialism was something that was more uh, present in the world pre-globalization era. That means pre-1990s, it could have been debated. Today we realize that China, though having its roots in the concept of communism and socialism, it has it is itself by economy, it's a capitalistic in nature. Why? So many investments are coming there. Its economy is open. Let us say investment from United States, investment from other European countries are being made in China. So the debate is not now on capitalism versus communism or socialism. It is the debate has shifted towards democracy and autocracy. That means having a democratic structure is better than having an autocratic structure that is based in China. So the focus of this debate is basically always this: whenever United States is contradicting or conflicting in ideas with China, the debate is shifted towards democracy of the West that is being promoted with respect to the autocratic nature of the government, the communist government that they have in China. Next is, we realize that now in this particular section, Shashi Tharoor has again pointed out the role of Russia. Please understand, Russia's role cannot be neglected over here. There's a reason behind it. Though Russia is not as strong as it was during the USSR times, but it doesn't mean that it is not a strong country. We realize that even today, those conflicts that are going on in Ukraine versus Russia, again, the whole Western world is supporting Ukraine, and China, Russia is basically fighting them. So it is basically an important player in the geopolitics. But we know that China is much more stronger now. What the other thing happens is that Russia and China have been basically together. They are collaborating in various dimensions. We realize that they have fuel and the oil gas exchange deals have been done. They are basically collaborating in various space programs, dimensions, military exercises. So there is again a nexus that is rising where China and Russia are again acting together. With this respect, a new phrase has come: 2.5 power world. 2.5 hour power world means one world Russia, one world China, one world United States, and a half world, that means a hurt Russia. That means because it is not in its full capacity. So what does this word 2.5 power means? One power is United States of America, one power over here representing China, that means two. Then we have half power is being represented as Russia. Half means, that means Russia is not as strong as it was during the USSR times, but it cannot be seen as a weak nation. That is why it is being totally seen as 2.5 power. But again, if it is even 2.5 power, then 1.5 power is together. That means China and Russia versus United States. Now, this is again a point of concern that is being raised by United States repeatedly. And even for India, please remember, when we are talking over here, for India, in the previous editorial discussions also we had seen, where we had discussed about Quad, we have discussed about United States and China also. So those things again with respect to geopolitics creates a lot of issue. As we move ahead, we realize that this particular section, Shashi Tharoor talks about Indo-Pacific, Quad and China, something very similar to which we discussed few days back. In which Shashi Tharoor basically says, see, the Indo-Pacific region is also a new field of battle or competition between China and United States. Now, India very well knows that India sees China as an enemy nation, though it has trade relations, no doubt in that, but it sees China as an enemy nation because it has a lot of conflicts. We have the border disputes, we have the Galwan Valley conflict that took place, we have the Belt and Road Initiative going through the POK, which basically goes against the integrity and sovereignty of India. And along with it, we have so many issues with respect to staple visas for the people of Arunachal Pradesh, and many conflicts are there. Along with it, more than 23 countries are in conflict with, let us say, land or sea disputes with China. And China's incursion in the Indian Ocean region is further seen as a threat to the India's dominance of the region of the Indian Ocean region. And in this case, the Quad countries, basically, which is the Australia, which the Australia, Japan, United States, and India, basically working together in order to, without naming China, in a way to counter China. Along with it, we realized that Shashi Tharoor has said that India also has very important relations with China. We saw that India is dependent on various imports of various critical minerals from there, dependent on the imports, let us say, semiconductors, chips, and all. So, various other dependencies are there. So, please remember that what Shashi Tharoor is right now pointing here is in this conflict, the choices are going to be there for India, right? Choices are going to be there whether India should go with the United States, or shall it be take China into consensus and also Russia into consensus and be with them? What should be the thought process? Again, the similar thing as you always talk about in international relations. Neither should India align with the United States nor with China, because we very well know that international politics works on the concept of interest. No country is, you don't have friends at the level of international relations. Those are needs and interests that basically determines your friend. So when we realize that China is creating a threat, we can have the Quad and the United States counter that. When we realize sometimes when United States is creating certain problems, and we have China and Russia because we have trade relations to them with them. So this is a balance. That is why what we say, strategic autonomy and along with it multilateralism plays a very important role. That is what the editorial in today's article in today's The Hindu basically dealt with. Let's move ahead. News in shorts. We have a basically an awareness campaign, Scam Se Bacho. The Secretary of Information and Broadcasting launched Scam Se Bacho, a national user awareness campaign. Now, please understand, we realize that so many online scams are taking place. So this is again an awareness campaign, which is basically working in collaboration with Meta. A nationwide initiative to combat rising online scams and cyber fraud in India. It has been conducted in 9 Indian languages. Emphasis is two-factor authentication, block and report, WhatsApp grouping privacy settings as a safety tool. Because Meta, you know, is a parent company of WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook. So it is working with Indian government with regard to this. The key ministries are, we realize that it is joint collaboration of Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology, Ministry of Home Affairs, Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, and Indian Cyber Crime Coordination Center in partnership with Meta, right? The parent company of Instagram, WhatsApp, and Facebook, right? So this is a awareness campaign that is going on. Again, what are the objectives? To empower Indian citizens with the tools and knowledge to protect themselves from the cyber threats, to foster a culture of digital safety and vigilance, leverage Meta's expertise, because you're using WhatsApp, Instagram, and Facebook, such large number are using. So Meta can be a quite helpful purpose because of the expertise that they have with respect to handling certain issues. So the campaign will see Meta's global knowledge to empower Indians to safeguard their online activities, ensuring secure digital progress. So this is something that you should know. This can be asked in your preliminary examination, but also with respect to cyber fraud, also you can quote it as a case study or an example. As we move ahead, IDEAS, it is Indian Development Economic Assistance Scheme. So please understand, India has extended its first ever rupee denomination line of credit worth 487 crore rupees to Mauritius to fund water pipeline replacement project. Now, what is IDEAS? Please understand that. Indian Development and Economic Assistance Scheme, IDEAS. Launch here. The IDEAS scheme was initially introduced as a India Development Initiative in the Union Budget of 2003 and 4 by the Finance Minister, and further modifications have been made. So initially launched in 2003 and 4. What is the aim? To provide grants or projects assistance to developing countries, particularly in Africa, South Asia, and other regions, with a focus on leveraging and promoting India's strategic and economic interests. So regions which are, let us say, developing in nature in African countries or even the lesser developed countries, even South Asian region, assistant or a grant is basically given to them so that their development projects, which are basically on a halt because of lack of money or fund, are basically completed. So India is basically trying to have much better relations with those countries as a means of confidence building measures. So they are seen as strategic and economic interest abroad, having good relationship with those countries. To enhance socio-economic development in the global south through infrastructure and the bilateral cooperation. So this is something, again, important aim. Key features of IDS: extension of line of credit to countries in Asia, excluding Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. So these are the exclusions that are there. Please remember that. This can be asked in your pre-examination, that all the countries, even neighboring countries, are included in this. No. We have an exclusion of Nepal, Bhutan, and Bangladesh. So all the countries in Asia, Africa, and other regions are based on bilateral agreements. Ministries involved: Ministry of External Affairs and Ministry of Finance. These are two ministries basically involved in this. Now, please remember MCQs. I have all the MCQs just to show you. The MCQs are here. After that, we have all the explanations for you. I will be pausing the videos on all these, but I would advise you to download the PDF also from the Telegram account for the explanation, right? Let's see. Please pause the video. Please pause the video and attempt the question. Please pause the video and attempt the question. 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 Now, these are the answers that are there. See, answer 1 is C with explanation. You can pause and see. Second is A. You can pause the video and see the answer. Answer 3 is B. You can pause and see the explanation. 4 is B. You can pause and see the explanation. 5 is A. You can pause and see the explanation. Because many had demanded that, sir, we need an analysis also and the reasons why certain answers are given as per se they are given. We have given the explanation also so that you can learn from that also. Please remember, the MCQs, merely practice of MPQ, is of no use if you do not understand why certain statement is wrong, why certain statement is right. Many would be using certain flukes also. Please remember, sometimes it works, but flukes are not something that are advised. With every question that you do not know also, read the explanation and gain knowledge out of it. This is something that is a learning practice. So you will be even learning how to attempt the question. So this was the analysis that we had from the Hindu today. We'll be meeting tomorrow and continuing with the analysis. Take care, and as you always say at the end, Jai Hind.